Dashing through the air in a one-shark open sleigh. Into the past we go, explaining everything away. Dumbledore's a grouch, while fish fly through the air. The doctor will change your whole past without consent or care. Oh!
Merry Christmas from the Dead Padawans Society, a science fiction and fantasy podcast celebrating the ideas, mythologies, and truths and iconic works of science fiction. I'm your host, Brett Inman, joined by my friend...
Nick Dennis.
Hey, Nick, happy holidays.
Brett, how much icing have you consumed today?
We have a snack table at work, and I have grazed generously. I'm intoxicated with the spirit of the Yule.
It's a little much for me. I'm already to the point of the holiday season. I'm already there of let's get it over with. Am I a Grouch?
You're definitely
am I a Grinch?
A Grinch or a Scrooge. Yeah, for sure. Sure. Yeah.
I love Christmas. Like I enjoy, but the whole lead up. I'm about 2 weeks worth is my max. Like
wow.
if we started 2 weeks back, I would be like, yeah, rev up for Christmas. But after the first two, and it's like, oh, there's another two.
Oh, see, I'm. The funny thing is, I am like that until we get decorated for it, and then I'm on board.
Oh, see, by the time we get decorated for it, I'm exhausted, and then I'm like, I gotta pack this junk up in 3 weeks. I just got it out.
See, I actually, we took a very different approach to putting our tree up this year. So instead of putting it all up at like one time and just being exhausted by the time we're done, we slowly put our tree up over the course of a week. So there were about 3 days where our tree looked like the partially constructed Death Star from Return of the Jedi until we finally were able to build the rest of it.
See, that is the decorations like for my entire house. Is it takes weeks for us finally to have found all the places to put the junk that we got out, and then we have it out for about a week, and then it's time to put it up again, and it's a lot.
Yeah.
It's a whole lot, and so
yeah, but it's fun.
I enjoy it. I'm not a Grinch about it, but I just feel like, man, I get it. I do get it why people are like day after Thanksgiving or even before Thanksgiving putting the decorations out, because it's just like it's a lot for just a short amount of time. Are you
You're a mean one, Mr. Nick.
Yeah. So we're getting close to the holiday season, Brett. What's a holiday tradition you and your family have?
Oh man. Tradition. So we're actually a pretty non-traditional family. So a lot of the stereotypical traditions we tend to buck, but there are a couple of traditions that I really love that we have. My dad started out as Bob Barker and slowly evolved into the Jigsaw Killer with our Christmas gifts. It happened whenever we transitioned from getting physical gifts to getting money for Christmas. So my dad, I think, felt like we needed to earn it. So the first couple years that he did this, that they transitioned, he would come up with these games, like just his games. It was sometimes they were like Deal or No Deal ish, or like we would pick a number and it would have a certain dollar amount, and then it's like, do you want to trade for? And like, so one year my sister and I ruined the game because he was like, I want to say I got like a nickel and my sister got maybe a couple bucks or something, and like ultimately there were like a couple $100 up for grabs or whatever. And we just decided we were content with what we had. So it was like, we're just happy with what we've got. And so he's like, are you sure you don't want to trade? I think you want to trade for this. And like ended up giving us the giving away the end of the game. Well, like I said, he gradually evolved from Bob Barker into the Jigsaw Killer. I don't know what inspired this, but his gifts, because again, they're money, so it's pretty simple, but he would start coming up with more and more elaborate ways to enclose our gifts. And so there's one year where it was layers and layers of boxes and tape, which, it was annoying to get through, but it was kind of funny to see us unwrap layer after layer. Well, that then started evolving, and so the next year we got these boxes that were full of great stuff foam.
Goodness.
Like straight up, he had made these little wooden boxes that like he had drilled the inside of, so he could put the money in there, and then capped that off, and then he put that inside of this ginormous box that he filled that morning with gray stuff. So the thing is, for most of us, the foam had not even cured yet, so it was still like gooey,
still
and
tacky.
stuff. Yeah. So my brother-in-law, by the time this was all done, had to like take a razor to his hand to get like all the excess gray stuff foam off. It was so. Then the year after that, my wife gave him a Christmas card that was sort of a joke that just listed all the things we didn't want him to use. So of course he felt that next year his obligation was to use all of those things.
Yeah.
So he put our money in a small PVC tube that he put inside of a Tupperware container that was filled with Great Stuff foam, because he just loved the result that he got from that. That he then put inside of a giant wooden box that he filled with concrete.
Holy crap.
Yep, filled it with concrete. And then he wrapped the box with chains and like locked it upstairs. So he had set this box up downstairs. Whenever we're actually like getting gifts, he comes out with this bag for each of us, and we open it, and it's got all these weird tools and things in it. He's like, "Hey kids, let me show you your gift." We go downstairs to like our garage in the basement that was not even finished, so it straight up looks like a scene out of the Saw movies, and we're having to like.
He's like, also your cousin's in there. You've got 45 minutes before he loses hair.
Want to play a game? Yeah. So my dad became the Jigsaw Killer. And that ended up a really, really fun tradition. I'm hoping that he didn't just do that to us, but will eventually do that to our children, because I'm looking forward to seeing that happen.
Watch this year. He's gonna have like an escape game like ready for. He's like, hey, these are getting popular. He'll have like the room you grew up in is like turned into like a prison cell.
Yep.
With the toilet that you have to fish things out of.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you got to break the bar of soap in half. If you drop it, you lose. So yeah. But anyway, yeah. So those are a few. I mean, again, we're a weird family, so a lot of the picturesque Norman Rockwell painting Christmas traditions we didn't have, but those types of things definitely were strong traditions. What about you guys?
Our Christmases were a lot less extreme. I'll say that, man. Like, our Christmas tradition was, like, going and getting a tree. Like, okay, did you grow up with a real tree or fake tree?
We bounce back and forth.
Okay. We always had a real tree growing up. And I didn't realize that... I mean, I knew fake trees existed, but I didn't realize how many people had a boxed tree every year. Because we went to a tree farm, and like, my dad... and us would go out and we would find a tree and cut it down ourselves and bring it back, get it on the car or truck or whatever, and bring it home and get it set up. That was always a Christmas tradition. And I didn't realize until I got married, because my wife grew up always having a fake one. And when I was like, I want to go get a real tree, and she's like, why? We can just buy, for the same price, we can buy one and have it forever. Yeah. Or at least several years. And I was like, but it doesn't smell good. Like, you have to get a real one. A fake one is fake. That's not real Christmas.
Yeah, and as a kid, you never had to clean up after the tree.
I did have to. One of my jobs growing up was having to fill the tree with water and clean up pine needles on the floor, because I had vacuum duty at my house. And so but we would always get a real tree, and we would always watch. Have you ever heard of Trapped in Paradise? That movie? Okay, a lot of people have never seen this movie, but we watched every Christmas. It was a Christmas movie we watched. It's got Nick Cage in it. So,
what?
It's Trapped in Paradise. Nick Cage has two brothers. They're both convicts who just got out of prison right before Christmas. And so Nick Cage is in charge of keeping them on their parole, but they've already planned another job to steal from in a little town called Paradise, where there's this mom and pop bank that they're going to rob. And so it's a really easy score, and they get Nick Cage to go along with it begrudgingly. Anyway, they get there, but then a blizzard happens, and they get stuck in the town after they rob the bank. And so they can't get away, like they can't get out of the town, and so like it's just hijinks, and basically, you know, it's a Christmas movie, and so people in the town start like taking him in and are kind to him and stuff like that, and it's hilarious. It is a really good movie, and I'm surprised. I always find tons of people who've never seen this movie before. But yeah, it was Christmas tradition. We can quote the whole thing.
Oh, wow.
But we watched it a lot. Well, we're going to be talking about a holiday classic today.
A holiday classic.
Doctor Who, A Christmas Carol. It is either a beloved favorite of yours if you're a Whovian, or a just hated episode. So a couple weeks back, we put out a feeler basically online and with our friends, just asking them what is a Doctor Who episode, Christmas episode, that is the best and which is the worst, because everyone knows Doctor Who has these Christmas specials they do every so often.
Actually, I didn't before this know that was a thing.
You didn't know that?
I didn't know that was a thing. No.
They're big. Like they happen. They put them in movie theaters. Like, and so it's interesting how some are like huge events to where they really alter, you know, what's happening in the show, and some are just kind of like throwaway, apparently.
Now, I think it's probably important at this point in the episode to mention that I have seen virtually no Doctor Who. So it is
I've only
seen blind spot for me.
In the new series, I've only seen the first 2 seasons and then dropped off. And so both of us are not Whovians. We do not know the lore of this universe or what's even going on currently.
As is going to become clear.
I know currently there's a female doctor,
yeah,
and that the new season is pretty good. Like that's what I've heard.
Yeah.
Other than that.
To just show my ignorance, I thought Rowan Atkinson had played one of the doctors because he was in a comedy sketch for Red Nose Day where he played the doctor. It's a non-canonical, like 2-part sketch with him and Jonathan Pryce, and that is literally the only Doctor Who I have seen. So I was like, oh yeah, and Rowan Atkinson was one of the doctors, right? Like I can remember I've asked a few Whovian friends that, like, so which of the doctors, because they'll be like, talking about like,
Mr.
you know,
Bean was never
Matt
the
Smith
doctor.
was
what
this
are you talking
number,
about?
and I'm like, no, I'm pretty sure. And then he turned into like Hugh Grant, I think, at the end. Which doctor was Hugh Grant? He was Hugh Grant. So yeah, so
I've got to see that skit now. Yeah. That sounds incredible.
Yeah. So, but that is like the extent of my. I have caught a few episodes, and again, having friends who are into Doctor Who, there are a lot of references, and you know, the Daleks and things, Weeping Angels, things like that I'm familiar with, but I've only picked those up through osmosis. Like I haven't necessarily seen the episodes with them.
Yeah, I also have friends and family members who are like really deep into this show and really love it. And so that's why we pitched it to other people, because we obviously don't know. We were like, it's a good idea. Yeah. We should do a holiday episode, a Christmas one from Doctor Who. And so we pitched it to other people. We're like, so what is the best episode you've seen or in the worst? And my idea was like, oh, we'll talk about both. Like we'll talk about the best one and the worst one. But the answers we got were all over the place. No fans agree on what is like the definitive best episode. But what I kept coming across was people saying that A Christmas Carol, this episode, was either their favorite or their least favorite. I had consistently people saying it was the worst episode and the best episode. And so it made me so curious. I was like, all right, we've got to do this one.
Doctor Who,
like, we've got to watch this
Carol.
one. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, that alone sounds like a pretty solid idea for for it.
I mean, everybody's done A Christmas Carol, so
Right.
you know, and it gives me a frame of reference too.
Absolutely. It's like,
Yeah.
well, you know the story.
I don't know Doctor Who, so at least I'll know the Dickens portion of this material.
Right, you could follow
Yeah.
along with that, and so I was like, it can't be too bad. So before we jump in to talking about it, I just want to mention a couple things. So this was the Christmas special from 2010. Is when the Christmas that it aired. It was directed by Toby Haynes and it was written by Steven Moffat. This is when Steven Moffat, who I think is still the current showrunner, or has he jumped off?
Again, basically in doing research for this, I think he has left the show. I think
Has
it has
he?
a new showrunner. Yeah.
See, it's interesting too because he is very controversial among Whovian fans. That there's people who loved it when he came on and people who hated the direction he took the show when he came on, because there's a lot of people who saw his stuff as almost like being a commentary on the show and the fans themselves and its history, which some people liked in that it like subverted expectations, but some people really didn't like that. And so it's funny that this was his first one, and apparently he also, because he did several Christmas specials had written several of those, and he's a big fan of literature. I think there's other episodes that are based on books, and so this isn't even alone in that.
Well,
But
he's
this was,
had involvement with Sherlock.
Yes, yeah, which is funny because there's a Sherlock moment in this episode, a clear Sherlock moment.
Oh, absolutely.
But this was before he jumped over to that show and was doing it,
Yeah.
and it's like, whoa, that's clearly that. But yeah, so this one's divisive. This episode's a little divisive among fans. It was Matt Smith's first Christmas special as the Doctor. And a couple of fun facts is Steven Moffat really loves Dickens, and so that's why he wanted to do this one. And he was also afraid of fish and sharks as a kid.
Wait, he was afraid of fish? I mean, like sharks, everybody should have a reasonable fear of sharks.
Right. But apparently as a kid he was afraid of fish and sharks. And so that is why they are in this episode. Well, before we say anything else, this is a spoiler warning for Doctor Who: A Christmas Carol. Go ahead and watch it and come back if you haven't seen it. So just a run through about what this episode is. A Christmas Carol tells the story of grumpy old Kazrin Sardik, a miser of a future human settlement on a planet surrounded by a strange and dangerous cloud belt. On Christmas Eve, newlyweds Amy and Rory are stuck on a honeymoon spaceship caught in the planetary storm when they call for the Doctor to save their lives. The Doctor swoops in to convince Kazrin to save their ship, since he owns a device that controls the planet's clouds. When the miser refuses to save the ship, the Doctor becomes the ghost of Christmas past by jumping back to Kazrin's childhood to save the young boy from becoming the warmed-over version of his abusive father. But altering the events of Kazrin's past does not have the exact desired effect the Doctor hoped, so he must use his cunning to conjure up the ghosts of the present and future to save the city and the spaceship. So, what did you think of this episode? Like,
I still
jumping-
don't know what I think. To be really honest with you,
well, before just jumping into, you're not a Who fan, haven't watched it. I've watched very little of it in its entirety. What was, jumping into this episode, what was one thing that super confused you?
Well, I mean, the opening, the episode, super confused me. That like the Star Trek-y, like we're coming in on a ship. The weird. I don't know what Moffat was thinking whenever he had the captain go, "Christmas is canceled."
It's the same thing. She's like, Christmas is canceled. And I'm like,
Isn't this an emergency? Aren't there more important things? Like your lives are about to be canceled. Like this is.
well, and two, it was like, it sounded like such a 90s action star,
yeah.
like line.
Yeah.
Like, Christmas is canceled.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. So that, and then and it's funny that you brought them up in your synopsis. The Rory and Amy, is that?
Yeah, those are the two
those two characters,
companions, sidekicks that he currently has, I think.
That was kind of, I'm like, who are these people? What is going on? Like, it was
well,
such
like you find
yeah.
out, and again,
Yeah.
I don't know their characters. I don't know what's been happening on the show before this, but apparently, like they're on their honeymoon, like they've just been married, because you get that information at the end.
So that was there.
But she's in a police uniform. And he's in a Roman centurion outfit.
Yeah.
And they kind of make a joke about they were in the honeymoon suite, and it was like kinky, but there's also I in looking into it, there's also like a time when he actually was a Roman or something in the past. And I'm like, this is so weird.
So the opening really threw me for a loop. I was like, what has Nick gotten me into?
I know. Same thing. When I started it, I was like, oh man, I'm not going to understand any of this. I was like, this is clearly one that is jumping off of from another episode. This is part 2.
Yeah.
But really, like
the stuff on the ship almost doesn't matter.
It's pretty much irrelevant to the rest of the episode. But okay, so another thing that super confused me, and again, maybe Whovian people probably understand this, but what is or how does time work for the Doctor?
Okay, that completely bugged me the whole time.
Because okay, let's get down to nitpicky. All right.
Yeah.
One of the big things in this episode is the frozen lady has 8 or 7 days.
Yeah.
She's got like 7 days left to live because she's got something.
Got a countdown clock until the day she dies.
Yeah, she's got some sort of incurable disease that the stasis is keeping her from, and so she's happy to go into it to save her family or something like that.
I'm going to die in 8 days anyway. So
it's a bit confusing.
Let me freeze myself for you guys.
Right.
As collateral for a loan.
Okay. So, but then they wake her up and have, every Christmas they have their days with her, but they go on these adventures that, do they do all of that in one night?
That's the way they present it.
So are they still, like, when they're jumping, to a party with Marilyn Monroe and Frank Sinatra, and they're going to Egypt, is the clock like ticking still for them? Like, that's what's confusing, because it seems like they've lived, they're like so... like they fall in love, like her and Catherine fall in love, and it's almost like they've become like his companions in like a little micro universe.
It definitely has that feeling.
And so it's like, how much time was actually spent with them during that time? It's a little weird.
Just the Christmases or the Christmas Eves, as I gather, like that appears to be the way that they're selling it anyway. Like, that's the context that's presented, is that yes, all of their adventures just happen on Christmas Eve.
But
like,
see,
the Doctor
like...
comes, he picks up Kazran, goes to, they go unfreeze Abigail, and then they have a 24-hour adventure.
But the thing is like, why would they have a time machine to which they can jump to any point. So And the two guys don't know about her condition until much later.
Yes.
And so they wouldn't be timing how long they're gone anyway.
That's true. Yeah.
And so
it just turns out that, they got to get Kazran's a
in
kid
that way,
at first,
just
so they got to get him back.
breaks
So,
down.
well, for me, the time travel element of this, like, time travel is really interesting and it's fun, and science fiction uses it all the time. But it really starts to break things super fast, and especially a plot that ostensibly has a ticking clock as, the ship is going to crash. We've got to save this ship. But I'm like, you have a time machine. Like, you could go back and here's so I understand. Again, being around Whovians, I know there's the whole like wibbly wobbly timey wimey, and they kind of play fast and loose, and And in researching for this episode, that I picked up that evidently there are some rules that the doctor's supposed to kind of follow, but there are ways to sort of bend them and stuff, and you're not supposed to change things in your own like relative past, and like there are weird things that they're doing with time travel. But
because the obvious answer here would be, hey, go back in time to before the ship comes into atmosphere on that planet and say, hey, don't land here.
Go just make a slight left.
Because you're going to get stuck and the old man is not going to let you land and you're all going to die.
Yeah, exactly. Or, any one of a million different outcomes. And then even the way that like time travel, okay, so she has an incurable disease. But you have a time machine. Nobody ever cures it ever in all of time and space. Like you couldn't, as soon as you find that out, be like, oh, I'm going to go to the point in the future where they have the cure for this. And then problem solved. No, that.
Yeah, and only bring it back for her and say, hey, you can't talk about this.
So, yeah, time travel automatically makes, for the Back to the Future has a ticking clock plot and time travel, but part of the reason that works is because the time machine is not working. Like the ticking clock is, will we be able to get this machine, there's only one opportunity that we have for it to work. And so you're working within that span of time, and by the time that plot has been set off, Marty has already messed up the past, and so they're just trying to fix it. And so they're doing some weird things with in that franchise with what the nature of changing the past,
right? Because in all likelihood, changing like little things would still, even if he got his parents together,
he would be a different person.
Yeah, exactly. He still might not exist.
Yeah. So for me, like time travel is really tricky in fiction, and if time travel is like the basis of Doctor Who, this really kind of hurt my brain a little. I'm like,
well, that brings me to the question of, is Doctor Who sci-fi?
Oh, that's interesting.
Or is it?
Yeah.
I've seen online it being billed a lot as sci-fi fantasy sci-fi. Like they still want to put sci-fi in there. Like they still want to have it attached to this genre.
Yeah.
For many reasons, but so much of it is just fantasy. But the thing too is there's some things that it puts forward that are interesting sci-fi concepts, but there's a lot of stuff that they throw out that's like sounds sciencey, but I don't believe is true at all. Yeah. I wrote down like for what's fantasy, I wrote down the Doctor fast talking science.
He does that a lot in this.
Like whenever he's just like, oh yeah, like, and I'm like, I can't even keep up with you. I'm pretty sure that's not a thing.
Yeah, the quantum resonance of the stuff with the flying sharks and what will help keep the ship in space.
Right,
like, you need to sing because of
singing causes a frequency that makes the like crystal inside them align, and fish really like it.
Yeah, that. Now, and the flying fish thing was actually something that was really interesting, and I've seen other works that have put marine type life, in the air.
Yeah. Space whales.
Yeah, whales and
similarly in like thick clouds of atmosphere to where there's something where they can be lighter than whatever gases are there.
Yeah, and so for me, like that's even that and science fiction could explore the idea of, what if we did have something like this, but they're just straight up normal fish. Like they're not, he talks about the crystals or whatever, but it's like you look at them and that's a normal shark. There's no explanation given to why these things can really fly. Like really, like it's entirely fantasy.
Even if that shark was like full, like had a bladder full of helium, it would still sink. You can just look at it and say that sucker's heavy. Yeah. Like it couldn't just be floating in your bedroom. But they must have just like paid I don't know, Sharknado somebody
Yeah,
like for their CGI
probably
shark
they're
to
like,
bring it over.
yeah, this. Hey, we've already got some CG assets over here. If you want to use them,
Yeah.
I mean,
Like, are you sure you don't want like a spacey shark? It's like,
No,
hey, we don't, just give it.
We can't afford that.
We got to
Yeah.
get rolling.
This is a TV. We got a TV budget.
Yeah. I also like. Well, I don't like. I hate. I'm not a fan of steampunk, and so like future Victorian.
Oh yeah.
Like drives me a little crazy.
Yeah.
Like if you're setting your story in that time and there's a character who has future inventions, you can explain it away of he's secretive and doesn't give it to the world or something like that. Wild Wild West did that, and other properties have done that. But when it's in the future, and I don't even know when this is set, but I mean it's obviously later than present, like modern day Earth, because I guess because there's humans in having settlements on other planets, and so it's just the fact that they're all wearing Victorian clothing and all the buildings and the furnishings and everything is this like Victorian steampunk, and yet they have cryostasis.
Yes, but it's Victorian looking cryostasis.
Right. It's iron. Like it looks like an iron lung, but it's supposed to be futuristic.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff. And I get it. It's an aesthetic choice. You're trying to bring back the
Well, and
the
for this
Dickens.
one because of the Dickens connection, like it feels like a copy of that.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't feel particularly inventive, but I get it.
Yeah. And it's like I could get it if they had some familiar styles or something like that. But it's just funny, like he controls the cloud layer with like a pipe organ.
Yeah,
it looks like some sort of like organ with knobs. And it's wood paneled.
Yeah. So in answering your question, it feels like fantasy. Like this it really felt like a work of fantasy, which it was fun for the most part.
Well, is there anything like really science-y about it that you liked? There's one thing that I really like, but
what was that?
So the time travel's real-time effect on memory. I really liked that concept, and I feel like that is science fiction there. If you were to go into somebody's past and like you still have communication some way with their present day, with the present day person, and they know you're going into their past, would they be aware of the changes you're making and you rewriting their history? Would that be an experience that you have?
See, and I would
to where you're like either remembering both timelines or you're losing things and changing. Like a couple other movies that have done this that I really have enjoyed are Looper, where the character who Bruce Willis plays, his past is getting changed, and so he's starting to lose his memories, and so he's forcing himself to try to create his future and push for that so that his memory stays. And that's a really unique way of doing it. Have you ever seen Frequency?
Yeah, once, I think.
That movie?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's a father and son, and the son, like the father died like many years ago, but they have this like ham radio that something happens to where he can talk to his dad in the past through it. And so things start changing, and he starts becoming aware of what is changing. And I think in that movie as well, he's aware of both. Like he remembers when it was one way, but then he also remembers that it wasn't, that it has been changed, and things in his life. And I really I enjoy that.
See, that actually tends to bother me.
Oh, they're like real-time changes happening?
Things like that, because I feel like the change... I guess I
it's
look
like
at,
it's always been.
Yes, I look at time
changed.
a little bit more almost deterministically. Like if somebody ever time travels, they have made all the changes that they're going to make, and we exist in that timeline. So there
So
are no
we would
paradoxes.
not
Everything
be
makes
aware.
sense. Everything
Yeah.
works. Yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, in some ways that this had that like I liked when he was in the past and he was talking about his bow tie and he's like, I don't care what other people think, and that's why it's cool.
Yeah.
And then
And that's what
and
he
then
has, yeah.
boom, he has a bow tie on.
Yeah.
And so it's
there were
like
there were
it's
clever
always
things like that,
been
yeah.
in that way it's like, oh, it's always been there. You've always had it, and you're just. But again, he's just now becoming aware. I guess in that way, he was just then becoming aware of it. But yeah, it's interesting because it is.
Yeah.
He's
Well,
watching
and
the
then
recording of it.
I'm okay with
That goes back to
like the split dimensional, view, where if you go back and change something, you sort of create a new branch of time that happens differently. And so to me, then you're not actually affecting any change on the original timeline. You've actually just created a new timeline that will have different outcomes.
And so that person doesn't exist anymore. Yeah. That's where this gets trippy and can fry your brain.
Oh, absolutely. Well, especially whenever you're then jumping around at will through time and space, like the Doctor does.
Yeah. Well, again, it just comes back to also like what is his timeline as well? Like how does that work?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because the thing too is like he kind of exists linearly as well because he changes like he becomes different people, like different actors like come in and are him, and then he's that from then on. Yeah. And so when he jumps back to a different time, he's still that. He doesn't jump back to who he was before. Yeah. It's very
Yeah, I think you're meant to just overlook the rules and enjoy it.
I think so too.
Which that's fantasy. Like that's
right. And I think they even have jokes within universe that make fun of the ridiculousness of it.
Well, the wibbly wobbly timey wimey. I've heard that explanation used.
Yeah. It's kind of like the Whovian trump card that can be thrown out of. Yeah, it's like we don't care. It's just fun. Yeah. Don't think too hard about it. So, okay, what I really want to talk to you about with this episode specifically is the Christmas Carol aspect. That this is a retelling in a way of that story.
So now we're actually getting into something that I know a little bit about. Hooray!
Yeah, because you are a literature guy. And so I wanted to pick your brain on what you thought of this version of A Christmas Carol. And you and I have been talking this week a little bit about remakes and about IP, people taking different properties and doing different things with them. And you turned me on to a guy online that I've really enjoyed looking at this week. His name is Kirby Ferguson, and he has a website and a YouTube called Everything is a Remix. He comes at all media from the idea of there's nothing, like all ideas aren't new, that there's nothing new under the sun, that everything has come from everything before. And so people taking strict ownership of things is a little problematic when it comes to copyright and trademark of different things, because ideas permeate the culture and change, and people are not ripping off other people, but people remix different things. Yeah. Kind of he puts it in the way of, how hip hop used to be able to sample different pieces of music and tweak them and change them in order to create something new. And thinking specifically on this episode, this is a remix of A Christmas Carol.
Oh, totally.
That it is taking a concept. Oh, one thing about Kirby Ferguson, I really like his definition for remixing. That there's three forms it can take. Either just a direct copy, which could, in some cases, get you in trouble with copyright if you're just grabbing something straight from it and adapting it to your own. You could get in trouble that way. There's transforming, which is taking something and then just tweaking it a certain way for it to look different, or combining, where you're taking that and other concepts and putting them together, and if they work well together, you've got then something new. And that goes back to that same musical idea of combining things together.
Yeah, which I feel like the story A Christmas Carol by Dickens has had iterations that exemplify all of those things. There are a lot of very direct, copies that are adaptations or
absolutely.
remixes.
This is like the most remade,
transformative. Yeah, and it's interesting that this
ever.
one
There's
this
so
one
many versions.
This one was interesting in the same way that because like you have a Muppet Christmas Carol combines two things. It's a very clear example of it's still the very traditional Dickensian story, but combined with the Muppets. Just mash those two things together
and
a
see
musical.
What happens.
Yeah.
Throwing all of those together, and it works really well. Then you've got I googled to just see. I was like, how many Christmas carols have there been? And I found so there's like the animated Disney Jim Carrey one. There's the Muppet one. There's an All Dogs Go to Heaven version.
Sure, why not?
of this. I mean, you've got Scrooged with Bill Murray, which
that one's transformative. So you're taking, instead of using the setting, you're updating the setting, which then reshape. Okay, so how do these ghosts interact with this character in this new way?
Right.
What do they look like? Oh, so now Jacob Marley is a former TV exec for Bill Murray's character, and so I feel like that one is very transformative.
Yeah, I even found one called there was a Hallmark Channel movie called It's Christmas Carol.
No. And
the main Scrooge character is a woman named Carol. But the reason I clicked on this one, I had to see a trailer for it, because Carrie Fisher was her Marley. She was like her boss that died, and so Carrie Fisher was a ghost coming back, and so that's why I saw that. I was like,
she needed a paycheck.
Yep, that's what it was, and so I was like, oh, that's really odd now that she's passed to see this now, because I was like, oh, wow. This looks terrible. This looks so bad, but. Yeah, there's people, because it's anyone can make a Christmas Carol,
and that's part of it. Yeah, because Christmas Carol came out. It was first published in December of 1843.
There you go.
And what that means is, not only can you transform it and combine it with other things, you straight up can copy it. If you wanted to go home and you wanted to publish a blog that is just the text of A Christmas Carol, knock yourself out.
If you want to make a straight adaptation into a podcast or a film, or you could just write the book.
Which, let's be fair, that's the reason why a lot of times around Christmas, even the college that we attended has done a presentation of this story several times, because
there's no rights to pay for.
Nope.
Interesting. Yeah. I hadn't thought about this stage plays as well. Yeah, because there's a lot of those done.
Yep.
Yeah, and so of course, for this property, Doctor Who, they decided that they were going to use it as well, and they were going to adapt it to their purposes. So this is a remix. This is an interesting remix of
that was actually
A Christmas Carol.
That was probably the neatest thing. So I'm still a little on the fence about Doctor Who as a result of watching this episode, but what it did with A Christmas Carol was really interesting.
Yeah.
And so I would say I actually enjoyed the episode, partly just because of the way it did some new things and the remix that it was of A Christmas Carol.
So what was effective about its version?
Man,
you?
The biggest thing, if I just straight up jump to the end.
Yeah, go for it.
The Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come, or Ghost of Christmas Future, that was the moment. I think that was kind of the tipping point for me, where it went from being like, okay, it's just an adaptation, to they did something really interesting. So the character Kazran has been, exploring his past, and actually most of this episode takes place in the past.
A lot of it's focused on the past, yeah.
There's a little segment that's present and a little segment that's future. And so you work through and you see the past, and he gets this relationship with Abigail, and you find out that Abigail's going to die, and then you jump to the present, and there are all the people who are about to die up on the ship, and his companion Amy becomes the ghost of Christmas Present.
Yeah, through a hologram and hologram of the rest of the people on the ship.
And so that segment's really short, and then you jump into the Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come segment, and it's clear that Kazran is actually familiar with A Christmas Carol. So Doctor Who early on acknowledges that he's familiar with A Christmas Carol. There's that scene when he's on the street, and
he's hearing the carols happen, and so he's like, Christmas. That was a one thing I thought was really good and effective about this as well, because a lot of times when somebody is doing their adaptation or remix of A Christmas Carol, A Christmas Carol doesn't exist within the universe. They are like the one, or it's not in literature. It is happening. Yeah. Either you're doing Scrooge or you're doing like Bill Murray, a version of Scrooge. And whereas
however,
this is like
Bill
the
Murray.
book exists.
Bill Murray exists in a universe that has A Christmas Carol.
In
Scrooged, because he is putting on a presentation, like
that's
the network.
right.
Yeah. So
they're doing
it does exist in that
and
universe.
so in that way, it's like self-aware that it exists in universe, and so that's a fun way of doing it.
So I love that at the end he gets to Ghost of Christmas Future, and so he's like, I know that you're going to show me my future. I know what it's going to look like. I'm going to be old and alone, and so he's going through that, and he builds up. He's having this argument with the Doctor and builds up to then show me the future, prove me wrong. And the Doctor pauses for a moment and says, I am showing it to you. I'm showing it to you right now. So what do you think? And at that moment, old Kazran steps to the side, and behind him, and in the background you can see the TARDIS, behind him is himself as a child. And so the Doctor is showing him as a child his future. And that to me, I'm like, that is so inventive, such a great way, because to me, it's a great remix because it takes the story and the structure that the traditional story has, but it also is taking that element where it's combining Doctor Who and the whole time travel thing. Well, now that we have time travel in this, because in traditional presentation, Scrooge doesn't actually go to any of those places. He's just seeing them. He's like a ghost in those places. In this one, they actually are going to all of these places. So what if you're actually able to take a child and show what's going to happen? And again, that whole memory thing, that then becomes part of his memory, and he now sees himself as an old man exactly like his father was. And to me, that was the part of this that it almost did something better than the original. And so that was really interesting, the way they combined with those two properties and did something transformative with it.
Yeah, I really agree that introducing the time travel aspect really ups the game on this, because like you said, in most versions of A Christmas Carol, the main character, the Scrooge, is just reflecting on things that he is outside of. He's reflecting on the past. He has a vision of his past, and all it is reflecting on memories that are solid in there, or stuff that is happening right now or will to come. And whereas this one is that the Scrooge character, Kazran, is actually being changed through new experiences. It's not just reflection on what can't be changed. It's new things are happening at the time, which is a really interesting way to take it. And because it's not visions, it's not spirits, it's science that's making these changes, and that's a really smart way of taking it.
Yeah. So that scene really, again, it elevated for me the work, because it, and you after the confrontation, when old Kazran sees young Kazran, he goes up and young Kazran calls him Dad. Yeah. Which he goes up and is about to smack him the way his dad would have smacked him as a child. Yeah. And it, like, just the combination of those things is...
It's crazy because, like, he's seeing into his own eyes as a child, the fear in his eyes, and the kid is seeing into the face of him as an old man. And it's just like, it makes sense that this is the breaking point for the character and the most transformative time, because it's like, and when they embrace, it's a moment of catharsis.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
To where it's so transformative that immediately when they go to the whatever the machine is that changes the clouds, that he no longer can work it because
he's so different.
Because
he's a man that his dad would not have given control to.
Exactly. His dad would not have allowed him to have control of the machine because he never became that bitter person. Which I thought that was great. Another thing I really like is the Ghost of Christmas Past. I love the idea of the recording being shown up on.
That was a cool visual.
Visually, like him walking through the door on the wall, and then he's in. It was almost like a David Blaine, like, oh hey, I'm in the video now, kind of thing. That was a really good visual representation, showing it up on the wall, and you can see it in the actor who played Dumbledore. What is his name? Michael Gambon.
Yeah.
Yes, he's incredible. Like, you can see he does so well at, like, in his face. You can see him like remembering new and having emotional experiences.
Yeah, his performance is excellent.
Yeah, it's really incredible stuff. I like how with the Christmas Past, it's not just reviewing, it is rewriting the past. And I like how his life, I guess you could say, was a tragedy before this all started, because he basically grew up very isolated and alone. You could tell that the kid didn't have a lot of friends at the beginning, and he grew up with an abusive father. But it's really interesting that as it goes on, you're like, oh, obviously everything's getting better. But what the doctor actually did by going back was creating a new tragedy. And so I thought that was really good as well, because it's like, oh yeah, he's obviously, becoming he's a good kid. He's having good experience with the doctor. So, when he comes back to normal days, like, oh, it's the doctor, of course I'll do this thing for you. You would think it wouldn't be a problem, but it was, I like that cause and effect of, yes, you think you're, for the doctor's case, you think that he's correcting things and making them better, when all along he's still the old miser sitting in the chair alone. So something
must have happened.
Yeah. Something is going wrong.
He has not yet changed completely.
Exactly. A tie has changed, a painting on the wall has changed, but nothing has, like, massively changed. And so I really like that part of it, that it was creating a tragedy as well. I thought that was really well done. So anything else really effective that you think this did?
And in some ways, as a remix, bringing new actors into it informed it. The different characters that were introduced kind of did some different things. I sort of wish that it had done a little bit more with the present, because typically, like, whenever you actually in a traditional presentation of A Christmas Carol, present, there's some kind of like joyful little scenes. You go to the Cratchit house, and even though they're poor, they're happy and they have love. And whenever you go to his cousin or his nephew Fred's, there's merriment and everybody's playing games, and it's really positive. And this one, the present was actually really bleak, because it's holographic projections of the people who are about to die. Like that was.
At them singing a carol very sad and eerily. Yeah, and also, usually in A Christmas Carol, the present is, for me, usually has the most, well, I guess Yet to Come has the most emotional impact, because it's payoff what has been set up before. The past, to me, is like, oh, you're understanding where Scrooge has come from and where he's gotten here. But the present is where you really, the Cratchits and seeing Tiny Tim, like, that's where normally that's where Scrooge is starting to break down and care for his fellow man a little bit, to where that's not
it doesn't happen at all in this work now.
At all.
for me, it was so my wife and I have a tradition of watching Christmas movies every year, and I actually found out she had not seen a traditional presentation of A Christmas Carol in a film. So that was one of the things we decided to do this year. So we got the George C. Scott version. It's old.
Okay, I don't think I've seen that one.
It's from the 80s.
Okay.
It really well done. It actually is kind of scary. I was sort of surprised by how many like horror influences it had.
Yeah.
But for me, there were probably 3 times at least where I was in tears, and a lot of it was around the Cratchits and Tiny Tim. And yeah, by the second act, you really are already feeling for people, and like there's so much humanity in especially Christmas Present that's on display, and this one did not have that.
Yeah, a lot of that was relegated to the past because you do get to go to her family, who kind of serve as a surrogate Cratchit family.
That's true.
They're the ones who are down and out and don't have a lot, and they go and have dinner with them. But yeah, that's all in the past portion, and so the present. Present and future were a lot more slim compared to what they usually are.
Yeah. So, I mean, on the whole, there were a lot of things that this remixed really, really well.
I also really liked the Doctor as basically his specter through this, because a lot of...
We actually are going to disagree on this point.
Really?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Really? Well... from what I know, that Matt Smith's version of the Doctor is a more childish and carefree than other ones, a bit more juvenile from what I've read, and so I think that works well because, again, he's going back to be a playmate for a kid in this. And so that works well. And just the idea of a big part of A Christmas Carol is bringing back childlike wonder and appreciation for the holiday, for the season. Yeah. And, Scrooge at the end is a lot more lively, open-hearted and joyous. And so like the, childlike joy that he brings into it, I think is like as that.
Yeah. I can agree with that. Yeah.
He's kind of, through the whole thing, he's kind of like the ghost of Christmas Present. He's like jolly.
That's true. Yeah.
Through the whole thing. And so that flavor I liked in there. So, okay, well, something you said makes me interested. So let's jump to what you thought was not effective in this.
Okay, well, it did so many great things. And so to say this, I don't want to say that I didn't like it as an adaptation of A Christmas Carol. I actually found it really interesting. It was a good remix. It did unique and novel things. But by the end, I feel like this actually undermines its own theme.
Okay.
And a lot of go ahead.
So I wrote down what I think is the theme of A Christmas Carol traditional.
Yeah.
And tell me what you think of this. A love for life and a responsibility for your fellow man.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable.
Okay.
Yeah. And that I would say that ultimately not just that those things, but that those things bring about the best possible life.
Absolutely. Yeah. So what do you think? What do you think undermines that?
See, here's the thing, because on the surface, that message is still present. Like you've got this guy who at the beginning is a miser and he hates people, and over the course of this journey through his past, his present, and his future, he learns to live in all three, and have love for his fellow man, and he allows the spaceship to land, and good times were had by all, right? As soon, though, and this is where I have a problem with the Doctor as the ghost of, or as, because in Dickens' story, did Jacob Marley or the ghosts have, like, what were they working toward? Like, what did they want from Scrooge? Like, what did they want?
Well, ooh, that's a good question.
What did Jacob Marley and the ghosts, what did they want from Scrooge?
Interesting. I've never thought about
nothing.
that.
They didn't want anything from him. They wanted him to have his best life. Yeah, Marley lived the same kind of life as Scrooge and realized.
I know, like Marley wants to save Scrooge from his fate.
Exactly, and that's the same goal that the spirits have. They are showing him this so that they can save him from his own destruction.
Okay.
So for me, whenever you give the guides, whenever you give those people a stake, like a personal stake,
they have their own
change.
motives in this fight.
Exactly. They don't want the best for Kazran. They want the best for themselves, which completely undermines the core message. That you can go back in time and, like basically what this says is Kazran doesn't matter. Like he's a pawn in our game to get our objective done. Like it's incredibly it almost has kind of a socialist like lean to it, where the good of the many outweighs the good of the one.
Well, right, and even just the format of we have to win this out by the end of the episode because we have to move on to our next episode.
Yeah.
You're just in this one.
Oh, absolutely. And for me, like even at the end of the episode, one of the things that bothered me the most and actually kind of got me thinking on this. Okay, so they thaw Abigail and she sings her song and the ship lands and everything's great at the end. And then what happens from that point on in the episode?
Celebration.
They celebrate. And you know who you never see or hear about again? All those people locked in freezers in Kazran's basement.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so if this was really about the good of man, like, because that's one of the things you always see in A Christmas Carol. You see a presentation of after it's all over, Scrooge sends a turkey anonymously to the Cratchits.
Right.
He goes and visits his nephew. He gives Bob Cratchit a raise. Like he does these things that
he gives the collectors a bunch of money for the poor in the workhouses.
Yeah, and you see that, like, honestly, it doesn't appear that he's doing this. Like he's enjoying it. Like he's realized that like this is where purpose in life is found.
He's getting joy from giving.
Yeah,
that action.
And in this one, no, it doesn't happen. Like he doesn't care about. Like he rides off on his shark sleigh with his blonde popsicle girlfriend, and so to me, and the doctor, like he and his crew, they don't seem to care about that. Like they're like, okay, our job's done. We saved the crew.
That's true.
Like forget about the other people who you're still treating horribly. Like they failed in their mission.
That's so funny. And that's another, that's a whole, like the frozen people underground. The idea that you take people for collateral is just like a thing that's just glossed over.
Yeah.
He's a bad dude.
Yeah. So for me, the fundamental flaw that this has, and ultimately, again, the story, the Scrooge component of this, I actually really like. And Kazran comes around, and I assume at the end he probably does right by the popsicle people. We just don't see it, and so for me, that part of the story really works. It's that the Doctor's storyline is the exact opposite of that. And even, there are subtle things where as they're going around in the past, he almost acts like he doesn't care about them. Like he had opportunities in the episode, and I didn't catch this until the second time watching it, where Abigail was actually ready at the beginning to tell them like why she was locked up there, like what the situation was, and he just straight up doesn't care. Like he just, let's go have fun. Like, and he's so self-serving in this that the Doctor is thematically upside down the plot and the theme that the actual Scrooge story is.
Yeah, I wondered that as well. I've wondered if that is a part of his character, if he's kind of views himself like outside of so many of the lives and things that he's a part of, that he doesn't like. He cares, but does he care? Because like when they're having that moment at Marilyn Monroe party, and she's just told Kazran the truth, and they are kissing, and they're very emotional at that point, and he just comes in done like, we gotta go. People is like, all right, hello, okay, I guess I'll marry Marilyn Monroe then.
Right? Yeah.
And then that immediately that goes into Kazarin's reaction to him is it's time to put childish things away. He's like, this is all kids stuff, and he's done with him at that point. Even to the point of when he sees him next, he shuts the curtains on him. He doesn't want to have anything to do with him. And yeah, that can be telling about your character of a bit insensitive.
Yeah. Well, and even I feel like at that point in the plot, when Kazaran closes the curtains, Kazaran has just interacted with his father, and his father has, plotted, this is going to be the course of your life. And the doctor then shows up, and it's like, no, this is supposed to be the course. And he's got all these people who are trying to tell him who he's supposed to be and what he's supposed to do.
Exactly. Like, is he being used, just as a plaything by the doctor?
Yeah.
That is interesting. I wrote down that the message is the same, of a joy of life and loving your fellow man and caring for your fellow man. But in Dickens and in a original Christmas Carol, I feel like it's a lot more subtle. That love is a lot more subtle through basically like showing Scrooge that your little actions you have great meaning, like you not caring about Cratchit's life and his personal life, that has nothing to do with your business, and not paying him well enough has a huge impact on his family, and not being connected with your own family and not giving to the poor when you have so much wealth. Those things have ripple effects, and I like how it's subtle in that way of, you being a good person isn't you pulling a lever and saving thousands of people on a spaceship. Because you should just care to pull that lever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, this is basically the trolley problem. And he's just a jerk being like, I'm not pulling the lever.
Except that the thing is, like,
it's not even...
With the trolley problem, it's always like, do you save one person or a bunch of people? This is like, do you kill a bunch of people or not?
Exactly. Whereas this lever is, it will put everybody on a safe track and they'll be fine. And so it's a bit caricature and... to where I like the Dickens version and other versions that kind of follow that traditional format of smaller actions compound and little things you do and how you choose to be who you are affect many different things, whereas this was just like one thing going back to the need of the time. So in that way, it suffers, I think.
Yeah.
So, all in all, do you think that this is a shameless ripoff of a better piece of literature? Like, because it's in the domain, it's open. Is this just stealing what can be stolen and using it for a purpose, or do you feel like this is a remix that is creating something fresh?
This is a very fresh remix, in my opinion. Like, I feel like it really does what honestly a lot of Christmas Carol adaptations fail to do, which is add something new, combine, transform. Oftentimes they're just copies, which, I mean, again, that's a form of remixing, but it's problematic whenever that's what you do. There's
right, because it's another this version of A Christmas Carol. I like my version that I grew up watching, so why should I watch this one?
Yeah. And so that this one was combined it with something new, but then also transformed it into, how can we explore this idea differently? I wish more adaptations of A Christmas Carol and even other public domain works. I wish more of them actually did what this piece did. I feel like Moffat and his team did a good job of bringing something new. This deserves to live. as an adaptation.
Yeah,
It earned its place.
Yeah, I
the
feel
table.
like as an adaptation, it definitely rises above a lot of the straight adaptations that I've seen, like the Jim Carrey animated one. There was one that Kelsey Grammer did a couple years back that I watched, and I was like, this sucker is just. It was a straight adaptation. I was like, this sucker is just dull. Like. Put the Muppet Christmas Carol.
No.
I'd much rather see Kermit beat Gretchen. But yeah, I feel like this one, it adds those flavors, especially with the time travel element. It adds a bit of fun and a different enough to keep you engaged and interested in it. And yeah, I quite enjoyed it for that reason. Yeah. What about, would this, does this intrigue you enough to watch more Who?
Oh, no. I mean, I would love to say yes. And there were a few questions about the world, and this led me to look at a few things about Doctor Who, but it didn't necessarily make me want to watch more Who. If anything, some of the Who things in it were like issues.
Detractors for you. Yeah.
Because the companions for me, like that just, I got that it was in there because it's part of Doctor Who, but it almost didn't matter. Like it would have been nice to have almost just left that part out, you know?
Yeah, they were almost not needed at all. I mean, and they were barely in the episode.
Yeah, well, and even where Amy becomes the ghost of Christmas Present, it would have been really easy to just have the Doctor do that and do the same thing, show holograms of the people on the ship singing, like
right, absolutely.
So yes, it really didn't. What about you? Did it?
Like I've said before, I've watched 2 seasons of it. So I watched Eccleston's season and then David Tennant's first, and I quite enjoyed them. But we got off of watching it, hadn't come back. This did pique my interest again, I will say. I wondered, I thought maybe I can ask my wife and see if she would be willing to go back to it and see if it takes again. That's
what, for me, Matt Smith was also a little bit too much of a cloud cuckoo lander. Sort of the male version of the manic pixie dream girl. Like I can understand now why there are so many female fans of this, because he straight up was the manic pixie dream girl. So the same reason why a lot of guys like Zooey Deschanel, I totally understand why.
Yeah, I can see that.
Why a bunch of women like Matt Smith's Doctor. Yeah, like it makes sense.
Well, everybody, they say, everyone has their doctor that they gravitate toward, and so
I would actually say I probably would be interested in seeing one of the other Doctors.
I will say Eccleston is kind of traditionally gets the shaft because he was on there the least, but I really enjoyed his version, and I think there were some creative differences is for the reason why he didn't continue on and exited the show. But his version of the Doctor was a bit more mean and a bit more condescending to humans. Like he had a very superior attitude, but I quite enjoyed his take on it, and I had never seen the old Who's before either, and so he was my first one jumping in, and everyone who I asked going into it, they're like, yeah, you just have to get through Eccleston, you just have to get through him, and then you can get into Tennant, and it'll be better. But I don't know.
It sounds to me like I might actually like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, I really like it. I don't know who would be my favorite because I haven't watched them all. But yeah,
well, and as a fan of some older sci-fi franchises, I've always been interested in actually watching some of the older Who, so that I know a lot of Whovians completely dismiss. But I've always had this like curiosity. I'm like, oh, it's old sci. Like some of it's older than Star Trek. Like I watched
recently. Because Honest Trailers did both the old series and the new series, and they ripped on both. But the old series, I was like, oi. I was like, I don't know if I could do that. just from some of the things, I was like, ooh, that looks rough. I don't know if I could get through that. I feel like it was made for its time, and it doesn't age well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, maybe we'll come back
I mean, how many more Christmas specials does Doctor Who have? Maybe we can make this a yearly event.
I'd venture to say that there's probably 10 Christmas specials.
There we go.
I would think. If not, they're getting close to that. And
presumably they'll keep making them if it's a thing, right? So.
Oh, absolutely. And they make it an event. Sometimes it's like a transition of a doctor into another one, or they bring back old doctors, or it's a major plot event. This one didn't really have that.
I'm kind of glad, actually. That's kind of nice. I feel like I would have been even more, because again, the opening, I felt very lost. So I feel like if it had been that the whole time. I actually did, as a result of this and liking it enough, I did start watching one of the other Christmas specials, and I was so lost.
Oh, for that one as well?
I was like, it didn't get to a point where I started understanding what was going on. I guess it was, I think it's the Christmas special where David Tennant stops being the Doctor, like that one.
Oh, okay.
And I was like, there's like the master stuff. I'm lost.
Yeah. So if we ever went to those, maybe we would need to have a better understanding of this universe and these characters. Or maybe not. Maybe we just, next time we'll just watch another one and try to decipher it.
Awesome. Well, it's been good talking about this work. I'm actually, let's just keep the holiday season going. So we did families back around Thanksgiving. This episode is a very Christmas-focused episode. So the next holiday... New Year's. Let's have a New Year's episode. Next episode, we are going to play some sci-fi themed New Year's games that you might be able to pick up and play at your New Year's party. The episode actually is going to drop on New Year's Eve, so we hope you tune back in and check us out then.
Awesome. Well, guys, thank you, as always, for joining us on the Dead Padawan Society. We appreciate your support and feedback. So please leave us a comment on the video or anywhere you find this podcast. Talk to us on social media. Email us at deadpadawansociety@gmail.com.
Yeah, if they put a "the" on there, they're going to get somebody else.
Yeah, you're going to get some, or not at all. So it'll be sent back to you probably. But just communicate with us and let us know. Give us feedback on the episode.
Yeah, and thanks to those of you who did give us suggestions on the Doctor Who episode or Christmas specials to watch.
Yeah, absolutely, because it would be a shot in the dark. We probably would have picked a random one that we wouldn't have understood at all. So I'm glad that this one was so beloved and hated because it was at least manageable for us to understand what was happening.
Yep.
So yeah, thank you guys.
Thanks so much. Merry Christmas.
You filthy animals.